I think I may have cracked how Boruto unlocks his hidden otsutsuki power, the Jougan, in the manga, after I did some overthinking about the return of Momoshiki. And trust me, it's nothing like what you may have heard before. So far the timeline is pretty clear. Boruto, after seeing no other option to deal with Jura, has approached Momoshiki for help. In return, he's offering him his body after they succeed at the mission. But the flash forward paints a different story, where Kawaki, who always held a grudge against Boruto, thus the village did not treat him as a threat just because he was the son of the Hokage, is now willing to safely seal him with Naruto, even though he can be seen using the Karma, meaning Momoshiki can take over anytime. Well, what's more fascinating is that the Jougan is active in Boruto's eye, which means he somehow unlocked it before this battle. And looking at how Kawaki is all okay with transferring him to Naruto only indicates that Momoshiki has been handled. So how was it possible at first place, when Boruto not only offered him his body after they are done with Jura, but also because the Shinju might have been defeated at this point, which means Momoshiki should have taken control by now. Well, spoilers for the theory, the Jougan is not what helped Boruto to get over the otsutsuki. Instead, it's an aftermath of a secret plan that was foreshadowed in chapter 57. So let's understand how it all boils down to the untouched DNA of Shibai Otsutsuki, which is buried inside the white Karma of none other than Code. Has been over 25 chapters of the time skip, and while we barely know how exactly we are going to reach the flash forward scene, we also have equally no idea for the Jougan's manga role. There was only one implication hinting towards the Jougan into blue vortex, which can be seen in the cover of chapter 22. The background looks like a gateway to afterlife, and on closer inspection, you would realize that it looks exactly the same as Boruto's Jougan eye when zoomed. Now it might be a reference to Boruto's death, which got delayed by the intervention of Kawaki, and if it's actually like that, then it perfectly adds up to the theory that I have came up with as well. Cause when we put it simply, the Jougan might only awaken once Boruto dies and resurrects. But the question remains, exactly how? Well, it shouldn't be too simple like Shibai giving Boruto another life, cause if that was the case, then Momoshiki shouldn't have explained the procedure for reviving Boruto, which included healing his damaged organs with the 18% of his own DNA, which was supposed to go towards his revival. And I think the explanation behind the Jougan has always been there in plain sight, so let's understand this with a really good example. When light enters a prism, it diverges into 7 colors, and we know it's fundamentally white in color. So if we take the same logic and apply it to the Jougan, it would explain why it seems to mimic or amplify the abilities of other dojutsu like the Byakugan or the Senringan. In short, it could possess the combined powers of all the dojutsu, since all of them operate on a different divine wavelength, making the Jougan the eye of an otsutsuki god. I will explain why its premature awakening and Toneri's involvement doesn't count in this theory, but let's get to the main source first. Colors in the world of Boruto seem to have a deeper symbolic meaning, and it's not only limited to the Jougan. Every Shinju being wears a different colored outfit, which even led to some theories that there may be more of them with red and blue outfits. The Karmas also hold a significant symbolic weight based on who's using it. Kawaki has red Karma, which symbolizes violence, blood and rage, which is what his character is destined to become as the apostle of destruction. The blue Karma of Boruto signifies resistance, not just in front of destiny, but the whole tantrums of the world as well, which should have made him give up long ago. But what about the white Karma seal, which is possessed by Code? It doesn't seem to signify anything massive, cause the role of Code has always been to get used by others. Still, the color of his Karma hints at some huge things due to a number of reasons. First off, it's mysteriously white in color, which when compared to the Jougan, must refer to something divine and godly. We got to know that Code failed the Karma experiment, which is why he got himself an imperfect Karma. Well, the reality could be a slight different, and here is why I think so. I think Code was an exceptional test subject of Amaro, whom he had tested with the Shibai genes prior to finalizing him for the Ishiki experiment. None of the test subjects showed a resistance to the Karma seal by whitening them completely, making them quote-unquote failed vessels. The reason I think Code may have already been given the Shibai cells is because Jigen may have given the divine remains to Amaro to upgrade the Kara cyborgs before beginning his own experiment. This was possibly done to form a strong team of inner members first, by amping them all with the Shibai cells. cells. But unfortunately, the ones who unlocked the Shinjutsu were regarded as too powerful. That's why they were ordered to be disbanded. Now when it comes to Code, he might have unlocked a particularly weaker Shinjutsu, which is the ability of claw marks, and that may be why Jougan or Amado took the chance and decided to use him in the karma experiment. The reason this makes so much sense is because Code literally worshipped Jougan and was even envious of Kawaki, as he had stolen his dream of becoming the perfect vessel. His obsession with Ishiki might have pushed him to be obedient towards him even after unlocking a Shinjutsu. And if that's true, then he might have voluntarily offered his body for the karma experiment when he was initially supposed to be a Shibai Cells Amped Kara member, just like all the others. The way he showed his grudges to Kawaki also indicate the same thing. But never would he know that his willingness to become the vessel of Ishiki would change his fate forever. You must have seen him getting used like a pawn piece by a number of characters. Well, it's only because he couldn't escape his doomed fate. And looking at the current circumstances in the story, Code is destined to get used again, and this time by Boruto himself. So here is the main theory which would eventually explain the Jougan's awakening. You may have noticed Code and Boruto share a scar in the opposite eyes, the same eye which is amped by their karma seals. And this isn't something coincidental. It could symbolize their parallel destinies, where the right scar wielder would somehow use his counterpart in the most unexpected way. Just like how every character has been mean to Code, Boruto would be no different, and he might have already put a secret karma on him when he was trapped in his Uzuhiko. There were scenes of Boruto getting too close to Code when he was having a vertigo without doing anything, and this may be the time when he did the unthinkable and made him his vessel. It's not even a headcanon at this point, as Kawaki himself has supported this possibility back in part 1. He wanted Boruto to make his own vessel to get rid of Momoshiki for good. But what's interesting is that when Kawaki proposed this plan to him, Boruto wasn't even 100% otsutsuki, and now that he has been a pure divine being throughout the time skip, there is no way he won't be able to make his own vessel. So before going over to why it also makes sense, considering the Momoshiki situation, let me first explain why the Jougan awakening after Boruto revives using Code's body is a huge deal. So far in the story, Code, just like his name says, has acted like a code to every major character or event. He was the activation code to Aida, Daemon, the Grime Army, and the Shinju, and this pattern in his destiny hints at him becoming the code for the Jougan's awakening as well. So here is why I believe it's possible. First off, Code's body has Shibai DNA inside, which is what made it resilient to Ishiki's karma, turning it white in color. Notice how Code has karma on the left side of his body, the same as Kawaki, which enhances the possibility for Boruto to use the right side of his body for karma implantation. So hypothetically speaking, when Boruto uses the body of Code to resurrect, his DNA would naturally react with the Shibai cells, which have already reacted with Code's own karma, and this reaction could awaken the Jougan in Boruto's right eye, explaining the significance behind this cover page. Boruto's destiny demanded him to die and then resurrect through the karma to unlock the ultimate power of Shibai otsutsuki. The scar analogy with Code was never a coincidence, since he was always supposed to be the last stepping stone in his journey of unlocking the pure eye. The abundance of Shibai DNA which fueled the karma seal of Code and made him an imperfect vessel was actually a defensive mechanism which prevented his death like the other vessels. In other words, just like how Boruto manages to survive every fatal situation, the same is the case with Code. Now the only difference is that there was no hand of an otsutsuki god on him. Instead, it was the potent DNA extracted from Shibai's remains, which made him survive the extreme scenario. But looking at how Boruto's journey has many times been hinted to be directed by Shibai otsutsuki, maybe the role of Code from the beginning was to let Boruto use the untapped Shibai DNA, just so he would awaken the most anticipated pure eye. The white karma is also pure in color, symbolizing the hidden power that Code cannot access. Now there is a flaw in this theory that I saw someone point out in the comments of my last video, but before I clear that part with the most plausible hypothesis, let's understand why it also makes sense from the Momoshiki angle, or let's say the current state of the story as well. So Boruto wants to save the timeline from entering the worst phase, and Jura is the key person here, who drives everything to that point as revealed by Kashin Koji. But by going to Momoshiki for help, he has gotten portrayed as the careless one, not because the otsutsuki would drive the worst possible future, but also because there will be more threats on the planet after Momoshiki, like an otsutsuki invasion or something like that, and he's not even taking that into consideration. That's why the best way for the writers to set up this as a clever move would be by making Boruto have a backup plan already, instead of the call for help turning out as a dumb move. On top of that, Code always wanted his body to get used by an otsutsuki, and while it was initially meant to be Ishiki, I think he was always meant to be used like a vessel by someone, and surprisingly it will be Boruto now, due to all the analogies that I discussed in this video. Now talking about the only flaw of the theory and how I think it could work out either way. Code being the new vessel of Boruto would mean that he will need to resurrect in his original form, meaning the scar shouldn't have been there in the flash forward sequence, only because it's a new body for Boruto, free from any scars or marks that he got after becoming an otsutsuki. So why is the scar still there? Is it going to be a retcon, which is very unlikely, or did they not finalize everything when the first chapter was released, which would still mean that Boruto should be scarless at this point? Well, shout out to Kobe Koruna for dropping some of the possibilities. So let's get over them before understanding what I believe may have actually happened. First off, there was a chance that the karma may have replicated Boruto the moment he turned into an otsutsuki, meaning anything which happened before he became one should have been healed after resurrection. However, the twist is that Boruto got the scar after becoming a pure otsutsuki, so this was only valid if the scar was given to him before Momoshiki revived him. The second possibility was that maybe Boruto could voluntarily choose which parts of the body he wants to keep in the new vessel, and that's why the scar is still there. Well, this kind of makes sense when you realize how Momoshiki was able to manifest a different horn while possessing the body of Boruto. He could have went with his own horns too, but for some reasons he took a Kinshiki look-alike horn to grow on the vessel's head. So considering the possibility that Momoshiki did this on purpose, well, there is a chance that Boruto would have been able to do this as well. But now the question remains, why exactly would he not heal the scar? Well, the answer can be found in chapter 78, in which he got his eye cut. So basically, he got the scar from Kawaki as he jumped to save Sarada from his attack. The mark here could act as a memento to him, which would remind him of Sarada's sacrifice, as she clearly would have died if Boruto hadn't interrupted to save her. The scar might act as a symbol of love that Boruto would like to keep forever, even after resurrecting into another body. This makes more sense when you realize how every accessory that Boruto can be seen wearing is based on a person from his life. The only person whose ornament was missing from this outfit was Sarada, but looking at how he may have decided to keep the scar as her memory makes some good amount of sense. Now, as for what I personally think may be the case, I think it would be pretty simple than what some people may have believed. Just because Boruto's present form is like this, he would undoubtedly transfer down the same form on his vessel and not his original body, which was free from any wounds or scars. We haven't seen any otsutsuki fully resurrect through the karma before, so how can we be so sure about the features that it puts on the vessel? Now last but not the least, another big reason for Code to somehow be the vessel of Boruto comes from his undisclosed hidden identity, which is rumored to be Uzumaki. The way he shares the same red hair, a natural resistance against the Karma seal, which is similar to that of a Jinchuriki. On top of that, he somehow mimics Nagato, as both of them were Uzumaki and got their hair turned from red to white. The other two Karma wielders also have Uzumaki as their last name, and looking at the parallel that Boruto shares with Code's scar, I won't be surprised if he turns out to be a secret Uzumaki member as well. You can find out more about this theory in the right video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.